Hi, welcome to Brian Sews. This week I'm going to talk about basically everything I've been doing this week in sewing. I've been making t-shirts, jackets, recovered a chair, I'm selling a sewing machine on eBay. What else? This week's sheet find, all kinds of stuff. So I hope you stick around. My main project this week has been t-shirts, and I'm wearing, this is my final version, I think, of my t-shirt pattern. I'll show you the actual details of the pattern in a minute. Sewing is great because you can spend a lot of time perfecting your pattern. You can take a pattern right out of the envelope and sew it. And it's much like ready to wear. You know, you go to the store, you try something on, it works okay, but it's not perfect fit. When you sew yourself, you can work on getting the fit exactly right, and you can spend endless hours. I spent a whole week on just a t-shirt pattern, making t-shirt after t-shirt until I really was happy with the way it looked. What I did with this pattern is I took my standard Burda t-shirt pattern and I included a yoke. So instead of having the shoulder seam that comes down the middle, it now has a back seam and this front seam here. This is really pretty easy to do if you transfer your pattern to another piece of paper. You can, you know, cut the seams wherever you really want them to be. To do this, what I started with was ready-to-wear t-shirt. This right here is my favorite t-shirt ever. You can see it's got holes in it, but this is kind of where I got this idea from. It has the same yoke idea. So you can, it's really hard to see the contrast on the camera, but there's basically a yoke and it has no shoulder seam. And I love the way this t-shirt fits, and I kind of like the way it's not your standard t-shirt. So I was like, well, I really would like to just copy this look. And I went through a lot of t-shirts trying to get it just right. And this is just some of the examples of some of the ones that I've done. A lot of it had to do with, you know, refining the neckline. This one here, this is made out of kind of like a cotton thermal type fabric, and you know, when you make something, you know, it's interesting when you sew a pattern that you know is a good pattern and fits. You sew it with a different fabric sometimes, and the fit is completely off, and you realize that, you know, each pattern is more made for a very specific type of fabric. Although you can use all kinds of fabric to make something, it many times will look much different in different types of fabric. So this, I actually ended up having to take the serger and reserge the side seams and fix the arms and the neck, and I had to do quite a bit of extra stuff to this to make it look right. This one, I really like this one. What I did with this one is I just took a little triangle of the same shoulder fabric and just, you know, cut it out and stitched around the edges. And here, I'll bring it a little closer so you can see what the actual, see how it's actually just stitched around the edges there. And after it's washed, it kind of does this little, it's not frayed exactly, but it has some texture on the edges. I really like that. And this is I'll show you some detail of what the actual yoke seam looks like. If you can see it there. This is hard. Let me find the other one that has. This one's a little bit easier to see. You can see that the fabric this is just overlapped. There's no, you don't put right sides together and sew a traditional seam here. What I do is I overlap the two layers of fabric by a quarter or by a half inch. And then this one isn't a good example of it because it doesn't roll, but on a standard knit, it will roll to the right side, especially after washing. So let's see if you can see here, see how it's rolled up. I really like that look. It's like this extra little detail. So on this one, what I did was this is supposed to be a little race car. I took stencils and acrylic paint, and I tried to, you can see the t-shirt behind me right here. This one has, you know, these little details on it that I really liked. And so I thought, well, what can I do to kind of try to duplicate that look? And I just got some stencils from the craft store and acrylic paint and just kind of blotted the paint through the stencils. And this is kind of my first experiment with this idea, and it worked out okay. It wasn't, you know, it has some work to do still to make that work. So that's another example. So that's basically what I've been doing t-shirt wise. T-shirts are just a lot of fun to make. You know, it takes almost as much time to cut out the pattern pieces as it does to sew them up. And you know, whether you're using a serger or a sewing machine, it's really the sewing itself is really fast. You know, you notice I don't do any hemming on my sleeves. This one actually needs to be trimmed a little bit still. I don't like to hem the bottom or the sleeves of my T-shirt because they're not, you know, they don't ravel. So who cares? My T-shirt pattern, you can see it on the table here. I can move it up. I should probably move the camera so you can see it better. What I do with my T-shirt pattern, I'll come get the camera so you can see. So here's the T-shirt pattern that I've been working on this week. And basically what I do is I just transfer my regular pattern onto this craft paper. And then I tape together, and you can see here, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that's where the original shoulder seam was, right there in the middle. And I tape that together. I mark, you see that pencil mark right there, that's where I mark where the shoulder seam is, because you need that when you line up your sleeve cap, which I have the same mark right there on my sleeve cap. Then I basically, you have to, before you tape this together, you have to cut off your seam allowance, tape it together, and then you can then recut your shoulder seams wherever you want. You can cut one or cut two. You know, it could have just been the back one. The front could have curved, you know, all the way around to the back. In this case, I cut out, you know, two because I was looking for this yoke look, and then I have notes about, you can see, add a 1/4 inch. So this is all a 1/4 inch seam allowance, the yoke. And then, you know, even on my sleeve cap, I write 1/4 inch seam allowance just so I know. And then there's my marking for the back of the sleeve cap. So this is basically the pattern I've been working on. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of T-shirts. So I actually realized I had to add another inch to the bottom. You can see the tape there, because after I brought them out of the wash, even though the fabric was pre-washed, they were still shrinking too short. So add another inch. Anyway, so let's move on. One of the other things I did this week was I worked on a Burda jacket. I've had this pattern for a while, and my friend Nancy sews jackets, and she's been really wanting me to sew a jacket also. And so I took the plunge and, you know, got this Burda pattern. Well, I've had this pattern for a while, but I took the plunge and pulled it out of the envelope and started making it. I'll show you pictures of the front and the back on the screen, but this pattern is got just an immense number of pattern pieces, and Burda instructions are not known for being, how should we say, user-friendly. So it was a struggle, to say the least, to get this jacket put together. And you know, the jacket, I think for the jacket looks okay. It's, you know, I didn't finish the lining because, you know, the lining's not attached here at the top, because the pattern instructions didn't really, either the instructions didn't go into it, or I didn't understand when they did what they were talking about. This jacket has the features of raw edges, which, you know, that's great, except, you know, all these edges are also interfaced, and so when you have a raw edge on a dark jacket with interfacing, you see the white interfacing showing through. So there were some issues with this pattern that I wasn't really fond of, and I'll put it on here in a second so you can see what it looks like on me. You know, I didn't have the shoulder pads, so the shoulders are a little bit floppy. It's not really my style, but it was a lot of fun getting the project finally finished.